Welcome back to the Practical Woodsman podcast. I'm Rut, the creator and host of the Practical Woodsman. That's right, it's my incredible genius which has brought this all into existence. Scientists and philosophers everywhere studying my noggin, trying to figure out how it works and harness its powers. You heard about this regular old feller in California, not a scientist or anything, just a regular old feller who spent years injecting himself on purpose with venom from all the world's most poisonous snakes. How you reckon that turned out? Well, better than you might imagine. You see, his blood could now revolutionize snake bite treatment, and we're going to tell the story about that. Did you see in the news that recently there were some New York hikers that called the cops because sadly their friend died while they were out there on the trail? Just kidding. They were just high on mushrooms and they thought he died, but we're going to tell that story anyway. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, say that 3 times fast, has been in the news. He's that guy that was the lone survivor in the Air India disaster. What do you reckon he's going through now? Just emotionally and mentally, as far as being the lone survivor of that plane crash. Well, there's this lady named Annette Herfkens, and she knows all about it. And she's going to tell us all about it. Hey, let me ask you a question. Why is glass solid? I know you don't know the answer, even if you think you do. Because the reality is that nobody knows why glass is solid. Isn't that curious? Despite the fact that folks have been making glass for more than 3,500 years, nobody knows why glass is solid. You see, when you study it, it looks like a solid, but it acts like a liquid. So we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a sad story, all joking aside, of a 14-year-old who was hallucinating and walked off a cliff right in front of his horrified father. We're going to talk about that experience, the final words he said, not to be grim or gruesome or anything like that, but to learn from it. Believe it or not, there are things to learn from that. And finally, I'm going to tell you a campfire story, a true, honest to goodness campfire story about the worst fish I ever caught, cleaned, and ate, and the circumstances around that. I think you're going to find that very interesting. But first, we got to do the musical introduction to get us all in the mood. Winkety winkety. So don't go nowhere. We'll be right here when that ends.
Put a camp up right here.
Well, it's hotter than you'd ever believe out there, and it's starting to get to me. I'm tired of being holed up around air conditioning, and it's just very, very unpleasant to go outside and be outside and do anything outside. I mean, I'll tell you what, to mow my grass, I ain't going out there during the day. If I have to wait until midnight for the temperatures to drop, that's what I will do rather than stand out in that sun. But, you know, the woods and the backcountry is calling me, so I need to get out there sooner than later. Some announcements. My online community is over on the Locals platform. You can join us by just going up into your browser. You type in the Practical Woodsman .locals, LOCALS.com. And that's one way to join us. The other way to join us is to download the locals.com app from the App Store and then just search for The Practical Woodsman within. I do live streams on Saturdays when I'm able. Of course, I have a new website. It's not finished. I ain't had a whole lot of time to work on it here lately, but it's at practicalwoodsman.com. I left off the just to make it easier for folks to find it. But this hat comes from there. That's a pretty slick hat, you got to admit. And there's some other things on there if you guys are interested in some Practical Woodsman swag. I reckon that's what the kids are all calling it nowadays. I'm going to have some hooch with me here for today's show, since we're just going to be talking and palavering a little bit. If you're a drinker, go ahead and get yourself a drink. Let's settle in here and talk about some of these things. First story. The man who injected himself with all this deadly serpent venom, poison. This comes from CNN Science. I'm going to get my iPad out here and read this, so I'll try to maintain eye contact with all of you while I'm doing this. Immunologist, let's see if I can do this. Immunologist, there you go. Immunologist Jacob Glanville come across media reports in 2017 of a man who had injected himself hundreds of times with the venom of some of the world's deadliest snakes, including cobras, mambas, and rattlesnakes. He had allowed himself to be bitten by these daggum things. The news articles were kind of flashy. Crazy guy gets bit by snakes, Glanville said. But I looked and I was like, there's a diamond in the rough here. Glanville's diamond was Tim Freed, a self-taught snake expert based in California. I told you he weren't no scientist or anything like that. Just a regular old guy in California, exposed himself to all this snake venom. Everybody thought he was nuts. For 18 years, he'd been doing this. Everybody thinks he's nuts. He ain't nuts. Because what he was doing was he was gaining immunity to several neurotoxins. We had this conversation and I said, I know it's awkward, but I'm really interested in looking at some of your blood, Glanville recalled. And he said, finally, I've been waiting for this call. The pair agreed to work together, and Freed donated a 40 milliliter blood sample to Glanville and his colleagues. 8 years later, Glanville and Peter Kwong, people's names always crack me up. I mean, I know all of our names seem weird to somebody, but my goodness, it's like the Matrix or something, ain't it? Some of these names. Richard Stock, professor of medical sciences at Columbia University, Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons, have published details of an anti-venom that can protect against the bites from 19 species of venomous snake, at least in mice, based on antibodies in Freed's blood and a venom-blocking drug. Tim, to my knowledge, he has an unparalleled history. It was different, very diverse. Species from every continent that has snakes, and he kept rotating between the snake venoms over a 17-year, 9-month history, and he took meticulous records the entire time, Glanville said. Got to throw this in there. He says, we strongly discourage anyone from trying to do what Tim did. Well, probably just legal protection there, but you know, the world needs creative and daring souls like that. Freed gave up immunizing himself with snake venom in 2018 after some close calls, and he is now employed by Glanville's biotechnology company Syntevax, Glanville said. Glanville is CEO and chairman of Syntevax. The research was published Friday in the scientific journal of Cell. CNN contacted Freed, but he did not respond to an interview request. Subtitle, The Snake Bite Problem. If you're unlucky enough to have a venomous snake sink its fangs into you, your best hope is an anti-venom, which for the most part has been made in the same way since Victorian times. Traditionally, the process involves milking snake venom by hand and injecting it into horses and other animals in small doses to evoke an immune response. The animal's blood is drawn, purified to obtain antibodies that act against the venom. Producing antivenom in this way can get messy, not to mention dangerous. The process is prone to errors and laborious. The finished serum can result in serious side effects. Experts have long called for better ways to treat snake bites, which kill some 200 people a day. 200 people a day, mainly in the developing world, and leave 400,000 people a year with disabilities. I was just reading in the Bible. The Apostle Paul was shipwrecked. He ends up on this island, and he goes to get a fire going, so he's collecting firewood, and he gets bit by a poisonous snake right on the hand. And it's actually latches onto his hand, just pumps him full of snake venom. So if you don't think the Bible is an interesting book, you're missing out. You are missing out. I won't tell you how that turns out, by the way. You got to go figure it out yourself. Glanville grew up in rural Guatemala, said he'd long been aware of health problems posed by snake bites, and immediately recognized that Freed's experience presented a unique opportunity. Exposing himself to the venom of snakes for nearly 2 decades by injecting venom and allowing himself to be bitten, Freed had generated antibodies that were effective against several snake neurotoxins at once. So they've been testing his blood, using his blood, making these things out of his blood. The drug cocktail the team created ultimately included 3 things: 2 antibodies isolated from Freed, and the small molecule drug varispline, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, which inhibits an enzyme that is present in 95% of all snake bites. The drug is currently in human clinical trials as a standalone treatment, as you and I are sitting here talking about this. So this varispline, blah, 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 granted protection against an additional 3 species. Finally, researchers added a second antibody. So there's a lot of like shop talk here. I'm going to try to skip over the shop talk. The antivenom offered the mice 100% protection against the venom for 13 species and partial protection, 20 to 40%, for the remaining 6. It's said that the human origin of these antibodies, that this regular old feller out in California developed in his blood because of the immunity built up in his blood. It says that this is a lot superior to the traditional way of making these things because it's developed in a human being rather than an animal. So it's a far superior antidote. If it makes it into clinic, makes it into people in the long run, it would be revolutionary. It would actually completely change the field in terms of snake bite treatment, he said. I need a better way to hold my iPad here while I'm trying to do this. I'm growing impatient. Let me see what I can come up with. There's a lot better. I'll tell you, another thing about it just being so ridiculously hot. It's hot outside, it's hot inside, it's hot everywhere you go. You know, I was just doing a little bit of work here today, and 5 minutes of moving around and you're just sweating. You got sweat running down your butt crack, got sweat running everywhere. It's a miserable thing. And it weighs on your nerves eventually. Yeah, you get impatient, tired. It's just unbelievable, this heat. So I appreciate you letting me complain about it to you. I got so many things. I know that for you, it doesn't sound very loud in here, but I've got air conditioners and fans running. I've got my mic set up so that you hopefully can't hear all that noise. But me trying to talk over that is frustrating and exhausting. And so there's a lot of these like little minor like discomforts, you know, that pecking at you like an annoying little brother or something. Tim Freed exposed himself to the venom of snakes over the course of nearly 18 years, effectively gaining immunity to the worst, baddest snakes slithering around on the planet. I thought that's a pretty cool story. I'll save that link there and maybe include it in the video. How about those New York hikers? Called cops because their friend died on the trail. Whoops, turned out they were just high on mushrooms. A pair of New York hikers called police believing their friend had died in the Adirondacks Trail, but were discovered to be entirely mistaken and stoned off psychedelic mushrooms, according to authorities. Picture says the hikers were lost near the Adirondacks' popular Cascade Mountain. State Forest Rangers near Cascade Mountain received a disturbing call from two hikers who said their friend was dead on the popular Adirondack Mountains Trail and that the pair was lost. A ranger was successfully sent to recover the two-stranded woodsman and quickly determined that they were in an altered mental state and later discovered they had ingested the psychoactive substance, according to the release. Hey, you know what? It could have been a lot worse. They could be dead. They could all be dead. You don't go around sticking stuff in your mouth that you ain't sure what it is, and especially not mushrooms. I'll tell you, if you just get it wrong, you're a dead man or girl, so don't do it. A ranger was successfully sent to recover the two-stranded woodsman. Oh, don't use the word woodsman for these guys. These are not woodsmen. These are, what would you call them? They're not woodsmen. They're just people who are in the woods. Quickly determined they were in an altered mental state and later discovered they had ingested the psychoactive substance. The friend they believed to be dead also called park officials and was found alive and completely uninjured. That third hiker, who was separated from his two pals, was found and escorted back to the group's campsite, officials said. In a twist of irony, park officials called an ambulance not for the dead hiker, quote-unquote dead hiker, but for the loopy duo who were zooted off of the psychoactive fungi. That's that story. Thought you might find that interesting. Boy, what an insult to use the term woodsman for this group of idiots that went into the woods and just started eating wild mushrooms. What an insult. All right, next story. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, age 40. Did you see the video clips of this guy walking away from this Air India disaster that killed something like 240 people? Everybody on board died, except for this one guy who walked off limping a little bit, but he walked off. There were videos all over X, all over the internet. Everybody was talking about this a couple weeks ago. Well, he's not the only lone survivor of some terrible thing like this. There was this other lady, her name was Annette Herfkens. Remember I told you that these last names, they really crack me up sometimes, Herfkens. That's just fun to say. I think Annette Herfkens' survival story is a little bit more interesting than Vishwash Kumar Ramesh. Not to downplay the absolute miracle of his surviving that event, but this Annette Herfkens, the way she walked away from her disaster is even more impressive, in my opinion. But this Vishwash, 40-year-old British man who had been visiting relatives in India, was sitting in seat 11A and somehow suffered only minor facial injuries when the Boeing 787 crashed shortly after takeoff. So this Miss Herfkens has a unique insight into what Mr. Ramesh might now be going through, because they're both among only a handful of people around the world who are known to be the lone survivor of a plane crash. On the 14th of November, 1992, Vietnam Airlines Flight 474 come down in the mountains on its approach to the airport, killing 24 passengers and 6 crew. This Miss Hefkins, who had been on holiday with her fiance, was the only person to survive. Now, what she thinks is that it might have been because of an impulsive decision to not wear her seatbelt. She was nervous about flying on such a small plane, and the belt made her feel claustrophobic, so she took the daggum thing off. And so she's got a book. It's called Turbulence, A True Story of Survival. And what she says is that she went flying like a piece of laundry in a dryer. I went round and round, and then I woke up under the seat of another dead person. I was hearing the motors, and the next thing was jungle sounds, and I could see through the hole in the fuselage. The jungle growth because the cockpit had broken off. It was complete chaos. Despite suffering extensive injuries, including multiple broken bones and a collapsed lung, Miss Herfkens managed to crawl away from the wreckage and survived another 8 days in the Vietnamese jungle before she was rescued. So that's what really, I'd like to maybe do an episode entirely dedicated to her experience, because that's just one thing after the other. So interesting. And I would love to share with you the minute details of, how did she survive like a week in the jungle after she had just been in this plane crash, and you don't know what sorts of shape she's in. It sounded to me like she did a lot of crawling around because she was hurt pretty bad. Looking back, she says the pain of her injuries was secondary to the grief of having lost her partner, Willem. The pair had been together for 13 years, so basically it was like her husband. They were planning their wedding when he was killed in this crash. So what she says about this other guy, this Indian guy in that Air India accident, she says he's not dealing with the fact he survived a plane crash. He's dealing with the fact that his brother died, she said. And it doesn't matter how he died, whether it was a plane crash or a car crash. You wake up, it's very fast, you discover your loved one is dead next to you. She says, that's what happened to me. It was never about what happened to me. She says, of course, with me, I had to wait 8 days in the jungle to get rescued, and that's another story. But it did not compare to the loss of her fiance. She says now her first thought for this guy in India, or I guess he's not in India, I think he's in the UK, but he's Indian. She says her first thought is, oh my God, they're going to hunt him down. She says what's difficult about it is you're not a celebrity by choice. Think about it. You're just living your life, and then the next day, swarms of media and everybody wants to talk to you. That can be easy. One of these days I'm going to do a show about the drawbacks of doing something like this on the internet. It looks a lot of fun. It is fun. It's interesting and stuff like that. But boy, I enjoy my privacy, and I don't like people to look at me and with stars in their eyes or anything like that. And I got a very modest sized audience, and just the attention that I get from doing this is sometimes uncomfortable. So can you imagine if the entire world wants to know your story and wants to know about you and everything? My God, that would drive me nuts. I think I'd go into hiding. I think I would just disappear into the mountains with a backpack and never come out again. So yeah, I can see why she would be thinking that that's what this guy's going through. She says, leave this guy alone with his mourning. Mr. Ramesh is said to have told family that he remembers a loud noise before the crash and then come around to find bodies all around him. He was scared, and so he stood up and ran until someone grabbed him and put him in an ambulance. He's now in hospital where he's already been interviewed by TV crews. Miss Herfkens spent several months receiving medical treatment. This is in Vietnam. Receiving medical treatment in Singapore. And remembers people following me around everywhere, she says. Everywhere. Someone was taking pictures of my broken face, she said. It wasn't until many years later, in particular, when a young Dutch boy was the sole survivor of a plane crash in Libya in 2010, that Miss Herfkens felt ready to share her story. One day, she says that this Indian guy will say, "Hey, I'm a member of the Lone Survivor Club," and then that's when you start deciding if that's part of your identity or not. That's also a choice. It takes time to realize it all. Another thing I say now is please don't ask him, "Do you have survivor's guilt?" That seems pretty ignorant and crude to ask somebody who's just lost, because he was riding with his brother. This Indian guy was riding with his brother, so his brother got killed in that. A bunch of, lots of families and their children and everything. Can you imagine walking up to the guy, "Hey, you got survivor's guilt?" Just seems so ignorant and crude and rude. And that's what she says. It's a rude question. It's an awful question to deal with. I got that a lot over the years. I had all kinds of answers, and it's like people almost talk you into it. It's like they're trying to talk you into having survivor's guilt. After the Vietnam crash, Miss Herfkins went on to marry again and moved to New York, where she had 2 children. She's been a successful Wall Street trader and believes some of her natural instincts in the fast-paced world of stocks are the reason she survived. You have to overcome your ego, your fears, and do the right thing, she said. Although Miss Herfkins knows she is lucky to have survived, she says she has not dwelt on the question of why she survived when others did not. She says, "It's like, why me? Well, why not? It's all random. I don't believe in predestination. I'm spiritual, and I did have a spiritual experience in the jungle, but life throws you stuff and you try to handle it the best you can," she said. "I'm a realist. When I woke up in the jungle, it was like, you have to accept that this is real. You are not in a romantic resort with your fiance as you planned, and now you're in the jungle. You have to accept things for the way it is and not the way it should be." That's an important lesson for everybody. Accept the way things are, not the way they should be. If you're out in the backcountry and things start to go south, it ain't the time to be thinking about how things should be. What should be or what shouldn't be. Thing to be thinking about is what is. And now I got to deal with what is, whether I like it or not. She says, "I had a near-death experience. Even when they found me, I was reluctant to leave because I was in a higher state of mind. But eventually, yes, as you process the whole thing, you're aware that you're a member of a very small club." For now, that family of Mr. Ray Mesh has lost a son, and they're going through a lot of emotions. Can you imagine? In the end, he will be happy to survive, I hope, she says. So that's the story about the feller in India and Annette Herfkins. What a name. All right. Let's talk about glass for a minute or two. You might find this surprising. I found it surprising that glass is not considered a solid. I can't remember the term that they used in the article that I was reading, but it was like a mix between solid and liquid. Yeah, like a mix between solid and liquid. But it's not a true solid like scientists normally observe solids out in nature. Well, there's this feller named Patrick Charbonneau. He's a professor of chemistry and physics, and he's using complex computer simulations to unlock the hidden secrets of glass. Listen to what this says. It says, "Why is glass solid?" Nobody knows. Did you know that? Did you know that nobody knows why glass is solid? It's good to remind yourself every once in a while exactly what human beings do not know. The really stupid, simple things. By the way, did you know that it was only like 10 years ago that scientists learned that whales sleep vertical? They sleep vertical in the ocean, and they actually got pictures of it. But before, like 10 years ago, they didn't even know that about whales. How about flight? Do you know why airplanes fly? Do you know what causes airplanes to fly and be suspended in the air? No, you don't, because nobody does. Nobody does. not even aviation experts understand exactly why airplanes fly. Did you know that? There's an awful lot of science built around a thing that they don't understand why it does what it does. And I believe it creates one theory is that there's a vacuum created over the top of the wing which pulls the plane upward. That's one theory. Another one is, where does oil come from? And what did they teach you in school? They taught you that oil comes from decomposing plants and dinosaurs and stuff like that. It's just a theory. They don't know. I remember my dad telling me years ago, this is when it's probably still in grade school. He said there's a large group of people who believe that oil is a naturally occurring resource on the earth, just like water. It's as abundant as water. And it's just a natural occurring resource that the earth produces. And you won't hear that in like the legacy media or anything like that because, well, it would just complicate a lot of other narratives, wouldn't it? But they don't. My bottom line is, I'm not being dogmatic one way or the other. I don't know. Nobody knows. I'm just saying it could be that. There's no proof to the contrary that it's not a naturally occurring resource. Well, it's the same way here with glass. They don't know why it's solid. It shouldn't be according to their understanding of things and what they observe. It says glass has a molecular structure of a liquid. This professor in chemistry and physics department, Patrick, whatever his name is, I get so tired trying to pronounce these crazy names. Patrick, professor, he says a wine glass is virtually indistinguishable from wine if you could look at them on an atomic level. Yet the wine glass holds its shape while the wine inside of it sloshes around. And they don't know why. How is it that something that looks like liquid becomes solid enough that I can build with it? This Patrick guy says. The problem is reasonably simple to formulate, yet hard to solve. As the molten glass cools, it hardens before its molecules have settled into the regular repeating patterns characteristic of most solids. But glass, as a class of materials, includes many plastics, certain metallic alloys, and more. The disordered structure of the molecules makes it hard to study or simulate glasses. We don't have an easy reference model, Patrick says. If you want to understand a crystal, I can draw a perfect crystal and then look at how small deviations from this arrangement lead to different properties of the crystal. But if you have something that's disordered, how do you know where to start? There's not a single way to draw it. The mysterious ways of glass. Glass looks like a solid but acts like a liquid. So there you go. Nobody knows why glass holds this hooch here and it feels solid to my fingers when it should be behaving like the hooch that is inside the bottle. Isn't that interesting? I find that so interesting. And like I said, for me, I find it very grounding to read about and think about all the things that human beings do not know, the things we take for granted. And, that's not what people prefer to focus on a lot of times. They like to focus on just the amazing things that humans have accomplished. And, there is a place for that. I like that too. But I think what is even more constructive for me personally are these reminders of the really seemingly elementary things that people don't know. I'll give you another one. Why does a bicycle stay upright? When you ride a bicycle, why does the bicycle stay upright? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. All of the reasons you're thinking of right now, but wait a second, isn't it just this or that? No, the answer is no. Scientists don't understand what forces and mechanisms make the bicycle stand up when you ride it. So there's There's an awful lot of things like that. Another one is, why is ice slippery? Did you know that scientists do not know why ice is slippery? They don't know why, when you go running and go sliding across ice, why you slide across that surface rather than just trip and fall like you do like on some concrete sidewalk. They don't know. And if you think I'm crazy or making this stuff up, you dig a little bit and you'll find the truth that they don't know. These are seemingly simple, elementary things that apparently are not so simple or elementary after all. We just take them for granted because what we do understand about them, we've been able to do amazing things with them, but they don't know. All right, let's see here. Do you know when people started making glass? Well, it's been for most of human history. It used to be just for the rich and stuff. So, that's why I don't like throwing away perfectly good glass jars and bottles and stuff like that, because you remove me from this time, put me in the time of like the ancient Egyptians, that have the value, like an old pickle jar would have like the value of the Mona Lisa to those ancient Egyptians. And so I just hate taking for granted things that should fascinate us still. I mean, people have been making glass for 4,000 years, something like that, but not with the ease that they can now and not with the skill that they can now. And if you look at a lot of those ancient bottles, they're not as transparent or as finely shaped and stuff as the glass we have today. So I'm just kind of fascinated, especially lately and currently, this may not always last, but currently fascinated by just normal glass that's around my house, and I hate to throw any of it away. So glass been used for many, many years, thousands of years. Ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, glass started out about then. All right, let's talk about this haunting experience here, about this 14-year-old kid, this tragic story. And no, I'm not going to be joking around about this because this is serious stuff. It involves a minor. And this is a true tragedy that happened this past week, I believe. From the New York Post, haunting words 14-year-old said as he hallucinated, walked off 120-foot cliff in front of terrified father. A 14-year-old California boy walked off a 120-foot cliff in front of his horrified father, telling him he saw snowmen and Kermit the Frog while hallucinating from altitude sickness. Zane Walk is now in a medically induced coma from the fall on Mount Whitney in the Sierra Nevada mountain range on June 10th. Sorry, I thought he died. Apparently he did not die. Now, he might have died in the meantime. I haven't followed up on this story. We will before we close down the show here, but I guess he was in a medically induced coma when I saved this article to my device. Happened on June 10th. Left him with severe head trauma, broken ankle, finger, and pelvis. The frightening events unfolded as the pair made their way down the mountain, but Dad Ryan Walk initially had no doubts about his son's ability to handle the hike. His dad told the news outlet, "He's in better shape than I am," adding that his son had hiking experience and was an active teen who competed in distance running, swimming, and triathlons. Dad's idea was this would kind of be his introductory trip into mountaineering. However, as the father and son were on the journey up the mountain, Zane slowly started exhibiting symptoms of altitude sickness, his father said. Now, I've been up at heights that this dad and the son were at, and I didn't have any altitude sickness or any symptoms at all, but I had done some reading up on those phenomena before I took that trip, and so I was kind of on the lookout for it. People in my group were kind of on the lookout for it. So, think about if you're going to be doing, high climb, higher altitudes than you're typically used to, it might be worth doing some research about altitude sickness, what to look for, and how it can affect people. As they're going up the mountain, the son says he slowly started exhibiting these symptoms of altitude sickness. The dad noticed his son was having issues, but they'd already finished the toughest parts of the hike. He decided to take an easier trail to ensure a safer 7-mile descent back to their car. Now, I would like to say, too, about the dad, when I first saw the headline, I started in the article, I did the same thing I'm sure a lot of people do. I started critically jumping to conclusions about what kind of father this must be. Not fair to do that. Not fair to do that without really knowing the details and trying to put yourself in his situation. As I went ahead and read this article, and as I put myself more in his situation, the more I could see the man was doing the best that he could do. Had no reason to even suspect that something like this would happen, but he really had his hands full, as you'll see. It says as they were heading toward the trailhead, the father said Zane started to experience some hallucinations. The father says that he knew, the son knew he was hallucinating. He said he saw things like snowmen and Kermit the Frog. The father said he was keeping a real close eye on his son as they made their way down the trail, and began to notice that the son was starting to look considerably better. About an hour later, however, Zane, the son, again started acting strangely and began doubting reality. Ooh, that's a dangerous thing to do. My best guess is a combination of exhaustion, sleep deprivation, probably some dehydration, and lasting effects from the altitude sickness. As they continued their trip down the trail, the father said they had to stop after Zane told his father they had already finished the hike multiple times over. He told me he couldn't tell if he was dreaming or not, and he would shake his head in disbelief like, this is not real, like he was in the movie Inception or something. Zane's deteriorating state of mind prompted a separate group of hikers nearby to call for a search and rescue team to get him down the mountain. However, around that same time, things went from bad to worse with Zane's behavior, his father said. He was worse than before, the dad said. He almost seemed like he was sleepwalking. He started dragging his feet and stopped in his tracks. He didn't want to go on. The dad said his son started making erratic movements toward the ledge near the trail with a steep, jagged slope, but the dad grabbed him before he could go over. The 14-year-old told his father that he was going to the car despite it being several thousand feet below their current location on the mountain. Later, he tried to move toward the slope, but it was stopped again by the dad, with Zane now telling him that he was trying to get dinner. So the dad felt overwhelmed. He's trying to take care of his son, trying to navigate and get down off the mountain. Got his hands full. He's responsible for everything and where they're going and if they'll get back to their car, and with the son being all right. And he's got all this stuff on him, carrying on his shoulders. Says the dad felt overwhelmed, trying to keep Zane safe and become emotional, tearing up and briefly letting him go. I had to wipe away tears. I was holding my hands to my eyes, and he walked off again, the father said. This time I didn't hear it until he was about at the edge, and when I went to reach for him, he was 10 feet away from me. I couldn't get to him, and he walked off the edge. Zane fell an estimated 120 feet down the slope before he hit the ground. The father said he bolted down the slope to get to his son when a nearby hiker, who happened to be an EMT, noticed what happened and started helping with the rescue efforts. Zane was left on the mountain for about 6 hours as the search and rescue teams worked to get him off the mountain. Airlifted to Southern Inyo Hospital in Lone Pine, later flown to the nearest pediatric trauma center. in Las Vegas. However, given the extent of the fall, doctors said it was fairly miraculous that he wasn't injured further, his father told the outlet. In a GoFundMe set up to help with Zane's medical bills, the dad said his son is improving and briefly opened his eyes on Wednesday, but still has a long way to go. Hallucinations are a serious sign of altitude sickness, specifically high-altitude cerebral edema, where the brain swells due to a lack of oxygen, according to Cleveland Clinic. It affects less than 1% of people who reach an altitude of 13 to 18,000 feet above sea level. Let's check on this guy, see how he's doing. Find his name. Zach Walk. It's either Zach Walk or Zach Watch, but, I'm so sick and tired of people and their freaking ridiculously difficult to pronounce names. Let's go up here. Type this in, do a search. Let's go news. Oh, it's not good. Oh, it is good. It is good. All right. I thought they'd disconnected him from life support, but no, they've taken him off a ventilator because he seems to be doing all right. It says recovery hits a giant milestone, but he's not out of the woods. This is from one day ago. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. Hope good things for that boy and for his dad. And my goodness, hopefully they can walk away from this and everything will be all right. All right. Well, so many other stories to tell you, but I think we're gonna take a break from the news. Got a campfire story to tell you. And you know what we got to do? If we're going to have a campfire story, we need a campfire. That's right. So what I'd like y'all to do, gather on around here. Come on down. We're going to go to this spot here in the woods. You see that campfire there? All right, that's our campfire. We're going to sit around this campfire and kind of relax a little bit, and I'm going to tell you this true life story of the most terrible and awful fish I ever did catch, clean, and eat. It was disgusting. And the story starts. Y'all settled in? Y'all settled in and comfortable? All right. The story starts this way. When I was a boy, growing up in the mountains in Appalachia, out in the middle of nowhere, out in the woods, my family had friends who were not from the woods. City slickers, northerners, Yankees, we used to call them. So we had this family visiting from up north, the Yankee family. I gotta see if I can tell this story without giving away their identities or anything. But there was a mom and a dad, and then there were 3 boys and a girl. And one of the brothers was named Matt. And so Matt, they were an interesting family. And, I loved them to death, still love them to death, but they were an interesting family. And this Matt guy, he was the oldest brother. And he had the tendency to be the most interesting one of them all. I was just telling my daughter, we were watching my favorite movie of all time, which is A River Runs Through It. It's a Robert Redford film. It starred Craig Sheffer and a very young Brad Pitt. But it's all about this family of fly fishermen and their upbringing and stuff in Montana. And every day after school, they would just kind of explode out of the house and go running off into the woods to go fishing in the Little Blackfoot River. And I was just telling my daughter, that's pretty much the way I grew up too, was every day for years. As soon as I'd get off the school bus, my school bus ride was like an hour and 20 minutes long, hour and a half long. That's how far out I lived. So by the time I got out and the school bus dropped me off at home, it was like an hour and a half after I'd gotten on that school bus. So for that hour and a half, I did a lot of reading, did a lot of reading, back in the day before cell phones, stuff like that. But as I'd be thinking about, man, when I get home, I cannot wait. I'd be daydreaming about the pond, Nola's Pond, we called it. And then we had this other pond that we knowed about. It was called, we called it Castle's Pond. These were relatives of ours, and the ponds we named after our relatives. So I would just be daydreaming about Nola's Pond. Man, as soon as I get home, I'm going to just explode off the school bus, run, grab my fishing gear, and run down to Nola's Pond or Castle's Pond and just fish until sunset. And I did that so often. So fishing was a big part of my life growing up. I know a lot of you may be surprised about that because I don't do a lot of fishing anymore. I just don't have the time, or life has changed. You know, I still love it, but I don't have the fever for it like I used to. And to be honest with you, I'm a little out of practice. I mean, I still can do it just fine. I just probably kind of look kind of clumsy to those who are doing it every day and really pride themselves in being really great fishermen. And that also is in, there's a part of that in A River Runs Through It where Norman McLean, the older brother, he comes back from college and he goes fishing with his son, with his brother Paul, which Paul is Brad Pitt. And he also has a hard time getting back into it. He's a little rusty and feels a little self-conscious about it. So I reckon I feel kind of like that way when I'm talking about fishing to people who today are very serious fishermen. By the way, I got this feller on our online community over there on Locals that I was telling you about earlier. Goes by the handle G-Huns. G-Huns, you're going to love this story, buddy. You're going to love it. So anyway, fishing was just a big part of me and my brother's culture growing up in the woods. And we had, on this occasion, this guy Matt, this Yankee visiting us from the city, from way up north, and he'd come down and spend time with us. And we went fishing one evening, and we caught a bunch of bluegills. These are sunfish. They're typically about that big. You can catch them very small, but you know, I'd say on average they're about like that big, maybe that big. Really good eating, but not as big of a fish as like a bass or a trout or things like that. Anyway, we caught a big mess of these bluegill, these sunfish, and had them up on a stringer. I said, well, you know, we've got so many right now. No, actually, this was in the morning. So we were fishing in the morning on this occasion. And I wanted to have them for breakfast, because what I would do is I'd catch fish in early morning or in late evening. But if I caught them in early morning, I hadn't had my breakfast yet. So what I like to do was take the fish straight home, clean them, fry them up in Kentucky Colonel flour, and have them for breakfast. So I said, that's what we need to do. We got plenty now. Let's head back with these, Matt. So he was all happy to do that. We get back, we get into the backyard. I set down some paper to clean these fish. Now with a bluegill, filleting is kind of time consuming, and you lose a lot of the fish if you fillet them. So they're not really great for the fillet. A fillet is typically better for a larger fish like a bass or something like that. So the way you clean a bluegill, the way we did it, was that you'd hack off the head, put a slit from the butthole all the way up to where you cut off the head, and you clean out all the guts with your fingers, and then you scale them. You leave the fins on. You leave the tail fin on, leave the top fins, bottom fins. You leave all the fins on, but you take the edge of your knife, and then you just scale the fish. So you're scraping all the scales off the fish. Well, I don't remember how many we had, but because they're small, you know, you need a bunch of them to make a good meal for several people. And we were sitting there in the backyard cleaning them, and I think I'd cleaned about 2 of them. And I looked over at Matt, and he had cleaned like 5 of his. I said, how are you doing that? How are you cleaning your fish so fast? Because at that time, you gotta understand, I could clean a fish so fast, especially using that method, like a bluegill or a sunfish or something like that. I could clean them very fast. And I had only cleaned like 2. And this city slicker, this Yankee from up north, had already gone through like 5 of his fish. Only had a couple left. I said, how are you doing that? He says, oh, I'm just really fast. I'm really efficient at this. I said, let me look at that what you're doing over here. So I crawled over around to where he was working there, and I picked up a couple of his fish. I said, well, you ain't scaled these fishes. These fish have all the scales still on them. You need to scale these fish before we can take these in and cook them. He says, no. And I'm telling you, folks, with the straightest face I've ever seen in my life, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, I know that's the way you do it, but this is the way I do it, and it's better. I swear to you, he said that, and he said it with such confidence that I thought, well, maybe there's something I don't know. How do I know? I've never tried it that way. Maybe there's something I don't know. So I said, are you sure? Again, him staring me right in the eyeballs with complete confidence, like overwhelming assurity and confidence in himself. He says to me, trust me, I do it like this all the time. I said, well, all right. Well, and then I started getting interested, like, well, this should be interesting. I wonder what cooking fish like this is all about. So we didn't scale the rest of the fish. We go in, we hand our catch to my mom. Said, hey mom, would you mind frying these up for us for breakfast? She says, sure. The whole family comes in. We'll all get around together at the breakfast table. Prayers are said. Everybody starts digging into those fish, and I'll tell you what it was like. It was like eating a bowl of toenails. It was the most disgusting experience of my entire life. And it was like eating toenails that once you get them in your mouth, you can't get them out of your mouth. It was that disgusting. And everybody looked at Matt like, what the heck? And my family looked at me like, well, what the heck is wrong with you? Leaving the scales on these fish. Because I should have known better. And I did know better. But I'm telling you, the way his artificial confidence, and he was just lying to me, is what he was doing. He had no idea what he was doing. You know why he said that that's the way he does it and that I should trust him and everything? Because he was embarrassed that he didn't know how to clean a fish. And instead of just admitting that, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, and Rut's trying to teach me something, that's something I could learn from, instead of that, he just completely looked me right in the eyes and lied to me to save face. All the way to the point of having a plate, like a whole bowl of fish at the breakfast table with everybody there eating what the experience was like eating toenails. And those fish scales, they're so hard to get off of you. I mean, if you've ever scaled a fish and you get that, your hands are like stinky and sticky and stuff, and you get those fish scales on you, they're hard to wash off even with soap and water. Now imagine getting a whole mouthful of them. It was disgusting and impossible to get those things out of your mouth. It was a terrible experience, and I've learned so many things from that. People will go to great lengths to hide what they don't know. And people will go to great lengths to pretend that they know things that they don't know, rather than just saying, I don't know. Well, I reckon I can say to my credit, even though I thought he was out of his mind and mad for leaving those scales on there, when he told me, no, this is a way to do it, trust me, I was at least open to the idea that maybe there's something here that I don't know about. Something that I have so much experience in. Perhaps there is another way of doing this that I have yet to be introduced to. So I will say that to my credit. But definitely not to my credit that I was so naive that I didn't realize that no matter how confident he's he is in himself. That it's madness. It's madness, the idea that you're just going to cook a fish with all of its scales on it like that and just jam that in your mouth and not have any problems. So there's my true story about Matt. Worst fish I ever caught, cleaned, and ate, and how just god-awful terrible that experience was. All right, well, folks, I'm getting tired. I hope you've appreciated and enjoyed this episode of The Practical Woodsman. See, that's what Practical Woodsman, how does that go? Let's see here. Okay, Practical Woodsman. And that's, by the way, if you want a really nice look at that hat there, that turned out all kinds of good. What do they call that? Embroidery. The embroidery turned out real nice. You see it there. It's not just ironed on there. That's actual embroidery. The hat is nice, quality hat, and get that in various colors. I think I'm going to get myself like a tan one or like a brown one to match the earthy nature of the woods when I go out there. But I really dig this blue hat here. Got another one here. Let me get that one and show that off. All right, here's the other one I ordered for myself, and this one actually has the Practical Woodsman written on there. When that text gets real small like that, it gets difficult for the machines to do that embroidery, but it still looks pretty nifty. And also with the text on there, the logo has to shrink a little bit. So I think I like this one a little bit better that has the larger logo. I just think it's a better looking hat, although I definitely like this hat too. And the embroidery really turned out pretty good, pretty great. And so if you'd like to show off your love of this channel and your love of the woods and your love of a practical approach to the woods, think about running over to practicalwoodsman.com. Y'all have a wonderful week. Take care. Glad that you joined me, and I'll see you next time.